The oldest 4-H camp in New York State got its start 100 years ago when Dorothy Powell, a 4-H farm and home economist, had the idea in 1924 to give young girls an appreciation of nature and the adventure of outdoor living. With borrowed equipment, including cots, dishes, and an oil stove from the Red Cross, tents from the agricultural school at Farmingdale, and pots and pans from the Central Park School lunchroom in Bethpage, she set out to camp on borrowed land on Long Pond, later to be named Lake Panamoka, in Ridge, New York, just south of Wading River. For 2 weeks in July 1924, 52 girls camped out on the lake. Dorothy Powell, later to become Dorothy Powell Flint, was the camp director, and the voluntary staff included a camp cook, nurse, dietitian, and instructors in archery, nature lore, outdoor living, dramatics, swimming, music, crafts, and hiking. In 1925, Dorothy Powell outlined to the 4-H Executive Committee the purpose of the Nassau County 4-H camp. "Our purpose," she wrote, "is first to teach club girls self-reliance, perseverance, cooperation, self-discipline, and an appreciation of nature by living out of doors. Second, to develop leadership that will carry on to the clubs during the winter, and to provide an interest that will maintain more than a one-year membership. Third, to create an interest among parents in club activities, and the interest of the girls. Fourth, to get acquainted with one another, so that I may better understand the girls' interests and problems, and be able to give them an all-around club program." During July 1924, the opening season, there were 52 girls at camp. 42 came for 1 week, 5 came for 2 weeks, and 5 were homesick and went home. During July 1925, there were 40 girls at camp during the 2-week season. 30 came for 2 weeks, 10 came for 1 week, and only 1 girl went home due to homesickness. Dorothy Powell commented, "The homesickness was chased away by the effectiveness of a staff of 6 young women, whose understanding and enthusiasm kept the spirit of camp lively and happy. Staff specialists were on board in health and first aid, handcraft, music, swimming, dramatics, campcraft, and hiking, and there was also a dietitian. The camp day started with a bugle at 6:30 a.m., with flag raising at 7:15 a.m., and breakfast at 7:30. Crafts started at 9:30, swimming at 11:30, and dinner was held at 12:30. This was followed by a rest hour and recreation at 2 p.m., story hour at 4 p.m., and supper at 6 p.m. A nightly council fire was held at 7 p.m., and taps played at 9 p.m. By 1926, under the leadership of Cy Pringle, a Cornell engineering specialist, boys started attending camp. By 1928, the 4-H Executive Committee was so convinced of the importance of the camping project, they decided to establish a permanent camp at Wildwood State Park in Wading River. Tents were built on platforms. Between 1928 and 1930, what would later become known as Pine Tree Lodge was built at Wildwood State Park, with monies from 4-H members and leaders, as well as Nassau County. The report to the Executive Board at the time described the building. "The Nassau County 4-H Camp Lodge is a low, chateau-like building. Dark green in color, it nestles in the woods, like part of the green foliage. One end of the building is used for an office and library, and the other as a kitchen. The central part is a spacious recreation hall and dining room with a fieldstone fireplace. The lodge was built over 2 summers at a total cost of $2,400. At the dedication ceremony for the lodge in 1930 at Wildwood State Park, a talk about building the camp was given by Mr. Halsey Knapp, and Milton Cohen, chairman of the council, explained what camp means. Mr. William Wilson, chairman of the board, explained the 4 H's of 4-H, and Dorothy Powell conducted a candle-lighting ceremony. The dedication program stated, "We feel the 4-H work is filling a need in the lives of the boys and girls. Not only are they being taught homemaking, gardening, how to raise poultry, and shop work as well as other things, but they are trained for leadership and good citizenship. This 4-H work is for our young people, and for their service and this work we now dedicate this 4-H Camp Lodge." George Burkhart, a Nassau County 4-H agent, took over as Boys Camp Director in 1930, and the Nassau County 4-H camp remained at Wildwood State Park, with summers divided into a month of boys camping and a month of girls camping. The 1930 camp brochure detailed camp activities, including nature lore, dramatics, swimming, and crafts and recreation. Staff included a nurse for health and first aid, a bugler, junior counselors, and staff in charge of 4-H ideals and tribe chiefs. The charges for campers were listed as only those sufficient for operating expenses without overhead: $9 per week for club members, and 3 weeks for $25, and $12 a week for outsiders. In 1939, the Long Island State Park Commission decided that group camping could no longer remain at the park. In order for camping to continue, a new site was needed. Dorothy P. Flint and her mother, Mrs. Margaret Powell, bought the Cavendish Farm, 24 acres in the Baiting Hollow, Riverhead area, which included a large wooded tract, as well as Long Island Sound frontage. They leased the property to the Farm and Home Association of Nassau County. Then came the hard work of land clearing, road building, and installation of fresh water and sanitation facilities, as well as electricity. There was a piece of farmland at the road entrance, but there was no road into the camp, and the first problem to be overcome was the opening of a road. Some of the older boys helped clear the trees, and Mr. McDougall of the State Institute and Mr. Burkhart dynamited the stumps. Then, with the aid of an old Model T station wagon donated by Mrs. F. Truby Davison, they were able to partially clear the ground for a rather rough road. The Edronell Council stepped into the picture to help. The word Edronell comes from the words head, heart, hands, and health in the 4-H pledge. It was first established as the name of a council formed in 1939 with the direction of Mr. Burkhart, and explained by one of its founding members, Anthony Famighetti, as a lifeline for former 4-H club members to stay close to club work until they were in a position to take on club leadership. The Edronell Council provided support for many camp projects. One of their first camp projects was to help chop wood and clear areas for cabins. Post holes were dug for 10 platforms, and platforms were moved on the top of an old station wagon roof to the campgrounds. Pine Tree Lodge was cut into sections at Wildwood State Park under Mr. Burkhart's supervision and moved to the new camp on Sound Avenue. George Burkhart had the unique ability of coordinating volunteers into a strong workforce and teaching the skills necessary to do the work. The winter of 1939 to 1940 was a rather rough winter and was spent working to build a new camp. Volunteers realized they could camp out in the old lodge that was moved if they pitched a tent in front of the fireplace. Throughout the winter, this group worked on clearing up areas and then got the idea it would be good to build a cabin for themselves. They cleared a spot where the Edronell cabin now stands and started on a foundation and floor. It took 5 years to close up the building, and it wasn't until after World War II that it was finished. Tents were soon replaced by cabins in the new camp, with a design based on the 1939 World's Fair Danish garden house, built with vertical boards. Mr. and Mrs. Arnold and Delvar Workman built the first cabin in 1940. During the Second World War, material was hard to buy. New buildings were made with second-hand wood, sometimes not too satisfactory, but better than the tent canvas that had worn out. In 1941, a new first-age cottage was built. Mr. Workman and his club boys did most of the work on this building, which became known as Soundview. A wash house was built the same year, which was big enough for the installation of flush toilets, an oil burner, and tubs for washing clothes. In 1942, 4 sleeping cabins were built, each 14 by 16 in area. The cabins were named after their builders, the Knowles, the Pansini, the Finnegan. In 1943, a team of men, including Burkhart, Workman, Brenner, Watt, Pansini, and Madzelon, built the first steps to the beach at the beginning of the season. Camp buildings were added, and within 10 years, a new camp, Edrenel, was established in addition to Pine Tree. In addition to camp building during World War II, the Edrenel Council started the Edrenel Cookie Project, enlisting 4-H'ers to bake cookies, pack them in cans, and send them to U.S. servicemen. As the Edrenel cookie makers noted, "It is gratifying to know that our cookies have arrived in all parts of the world, bringing with them a little part of home." A thankful serviceman wrote from Norman, Oklahoma, on January 24, 1945. "Dear Mrs. Flint, received your can of cookies the other day, and if I must say, it sure came in handy at a time when most needed. You see, I had slept during chow time and woke up too late to get any. So along came the cookies. That settled matters just fine. They certainly are delicious cookies. You can take that as a request for more. Thank you kindly for your trouble, Mr. J. Mazzio." The Edrenel camp expanded to include a large dining hall and kitchen, as well as 11 campers' cabins and 3 staff cabins, a wash house, and craft shelter, all built by volunteers under the supervision of Mr. Burkhart. Outdoor living and pioneer camping were still emphasized, and older campers in a pioneering program cooked their own meals over an open fire and slept under the stars. A home economics center was built, named the Gray Beach Unit, for home economics training. Both Pine Tree and Edrenel camps had their own council rings. As in many summer camps at the time, Indian lore was a central feature of the camping experience. There was a shared large recreation field, and picnic tables and fireplaces were set aside for Visitors' Day as well as camper cookouts. By 1949, 2 new sleeping cabins, 18 by 20, with novelty siding were built. There was a new craft shelter, and cabins were stained with a green oil stain, greatly improving the appearance of camp. 4 dining room tables and benches were built by leaders and junior counselors who visited the camp on weekends. A small 8 by 10 cabin was built as a canteen. In 1949, Nassau County, under County Executive A. Holly Patterson, purchased the camp area from Mrs. Flint's mother and leased it to the Nassau County Extension Service to continue as 4-H camp. Later, the county was to purchase an additional 125 acres adjoining the original property, so that the camp could further expand. In 1951, the Kiwanis clubs in Nassau County gave and built Kiwanis Hall in Edrenel Camp, serving as a recreation room, craft workshop, and nature laboratory. Kiwanis Hall included a trophy room, craft room, storage room, porch, and a stage. By 1952, the large 5-acre recreation field was graded, and more cabins were built. A kiln was purchased for ceramic work. Tables and benches were built for the dining hall. In 1953, a camp caretaker, Herbert Peters, was hired. and a cottage with a 2-car garage and workshop was built for him and his family at the entrance to the campgrounds. An old farmhouse which Mrs. Flint had moved to the top of the bluff overlooking the sound and used for a staff house burned down and was replaced by the current Cliff House, with a large conference room and library at its center and bedrooms in the wings on either side. The large Edronell dining hall, erected by 4-H workers, was dedicated by Nassau County Executive A. Holly Patterson. By 1956, Pine Tree Camp had been designated as a boys' camp and Edronell as a girls' camp. Over 600 boys and girls were attending camp each season. Herbert Peters was succeeded as caretaker in 1959 by Ray Timon, who served until 1967. Bill Henenlotter, who had been a camper and counselor since the 1940s, started as caretaker in 1967 and served for over 30 years. He was succeeded in 1999 by Mike Masaryk. In 1956, Mr. Burkhart introduced the idea of a Counselor Honorary Society to recognize outstanding staff and to provide advice and counseling to staff who were considered wanting. Election to the society was by a unanimous vote of existing members. The Boys' Honorary Society, Tanrio, was soon followed by the Girls' Honorary Society, Ojishanda. Both honor societies raised monies for camper scholarships, and both honor societies lasted through the early 1970s. In 1957, Marilyn Meyer, who had been attending camp since the 1940s as both a camper and a counselor, was hired as an assistant agent and organized a year-round camping program, including 4-H club members who went to camp during the weekends with their leaders and parents. Those first 7 weekend camping trips during the fall of 1957 included groups ranging from 15 to 71 in number. Campers participated in fire building, outdoor cooking, crafts, recreation, hiking, and courses in natural science. The boys, under the direction of Mr. Burkhart, used the weekends to aid in camp construction. One of the larger projects included refinishing the interior and exterior of the Pine Tree Lodge.
Colors flying high above, green, white, and red, white, and blue. Camp 4-H.
By 1960, almost 1,000 boys and girls were attending camp each season, and camp expansion was supported by the Nassau County Executive A. Holly Patterson. The 1960 camp brochure proclaimed, "This year the Pine Tree Camp offers boys an opportunity to choose special interests based on personal desires and abilities. Pine Tree Camp offers a junior leader training program for those interested in counselorships, a chance for service and opportunities for learning. Campers live and play in a home-like atmosphere and participate in Indian lore, swimming, crafts, recreation, evening program, archery, vespers, food preparation, and clean-up chores. As the day draws to a close, a pause is taken in a busy schedule for a short session called Vespers. Here, inspirational and biblical stories are told or acted out. Ceremonies or pageants are put on. Here also new inspiration in the great outdoors, new respect for sky and sea, and the high ideals exemplified in the Health H development are gained." The 1960 brochure goes on to state, "A model farm with farm animals will be added as a feature of 4-H camp this year." The farm camp was established with Angus beef cattle, Suffolk sheep, a flock of chickens, rabbits, geese, ducks, and a large garden. Courses in horticulture and agronomy were offered, as well as entomology, conservation, embryology, incubation and poultry science, farm machinery maintenance and operation, and farm safety. Campers at the farm had work experience harvesting hay, corn, strawberries, fruits and vegetables, and took field trips to other farms in the area. 4-H Club agents, specialists from Cornell University, including Professor Ed Shano, and qualified counselors from colleges also participated. The first farm supervisor was Donald McVean, followed by John Mulcahy in 1962. The physical building of camp was greatly aided by weekend work camps, with those participating helping to build dining halls, offices, cabins and staff houses, multi-purpose shelters, and a barn. By 1964, there was a total of 86 buildings on camp property. In 1961, the area which was to become known as the Wildwood Camp was purchased. In 1962, it was established as a co-ed teen camp with 8 cabins as well as a lodge, which served as a dining hall and dormitory, and as a temporary first aid and infirmary. Construction of the lodge was directed by George Burkhart, Ray Timon, Ted Jenkins, John Mulcahy, Irving Blatt, and Albert Brecht, and it was dedicated in a ceremony featuring Nassau County Executive Eugene Nickerson. In the new Wildwood Camp, boys and girls 12 years and older learned about natural science, outdoor living and conservation, and participated in recreation leadership and junior leadership units. By 1963, a barn was built, and the farm unit was formally established, with farm manager John Mulcahy and the first farm unit leader, Don O'Callahan. George Burkhart passed away suddenly in 1963, and a memorial arboretum was established in the southwest section of Wildwood Camp. The dedication ceremony in the summer of 1964 included Dorothy P. Flint and the Nassau County Executive Eugene Nickerson. By 1964, Don O'Callahan was hired as a 4-H agent and assistant Pine Tree Camp director. In 1965, the Wildwood Craft Shelter was completed, and the Wildwood Staff House was started. All camps were rearranged. Pine Tree Camp was established for girls in grades 3 through 6, and Edronell for girls in grades 7 through 11, with Wildwood Camp for boys between grades 3 and 11. In 1966, Joe Passantino, a graduate of SUNY Farmingdale, was hired as farm manager, remaining in that position for many years, and being succeeded by Willie Sang. In 1966 and 1967, teen work weekends were increased and included science programs on Friday evenings and bowling tournaments on Saturday evenings. The Wildwood Staff House was completed, as was the Wildwood Canteen, and 4 lean-to Adirondack shelters were built to replace the tents for the conservation unit. A Shetland pony care program was started in 1966 with 10 mares and 1 stallion. A new Edronell Pine Tree Health Lodge was constructed in 1968, and a pony barn was also added. Mr. and Mrs. Ken Terry, neighbors of the camp, donated a building to the north of the barn to be used as an agricultural science center. In 1970, the Del R Shelter, honoring Del and Arnold Workman, was built to the north of the Pine Tree Campfire Ring. It was the first octagonal building at camp and brought the total number of buildings on campgrounds to 104. On April 1, 1970, Dorothy P. Flint retired as 4-H division leader after 47 years of service to the Nassau County 4-H program. At her testimonial retirement dinner, the building of a science conference center in her honor, to be located at camp, was announced. Mrs. Flint passed away on September 3, 1970, and the Nassau County Board of Supervisors renamed the camp she had originally founded in 1924, the Dorothy P. Flint Nassau County 4-H Camp. By the spring of 1971, construction was started on the Dorothy P. Flint Science Conference Center, and the center was dedicated on July 30, 1972, in a ceremony at camp with more than 500 in attendance. The ceremony included the unveiling of Mrs. Flint's portrait, favorite songs of Mrs. Flint sung by a camper counselor choir led by Marilyn Meyer, and an address by the Nassau County Executive Ralph Caso. As 4-H camp approached the end of its first 50 years, most of the structures we see at camp today had been built, though there would be some notable additions, including a large equestrian center, additional farm buildings, and a high ropes course. Super cabins with electricity, sliding windows, and paneling were also built. The numbers of campers would expand and contract over the years, and camp activities became centered in the west side of camp at Wildwood. Counselors recruited from around the world became an integral part of camp, and a day camp program was started as well. Through all the changes, camp activities remain remarkably similar to those initiated by Dorothy Powell 100 years ago, developing skills in outdoor living, swimming, sports, crafts, construction, and skills required by homemakers, as well as knowledge and appreciation of nature and agriculture. The central themes of camp, learning by doing, making our best better, working in and supporting the group, and developing leadership skills remain the same. Many friends we make at camp become friends for life. Some become family. All share in the magic of that idyllic spot on the north shore of Long Island, where for a few weeks each summer we experience things and meet people that enrich the rest of our lives. As Dorothy P. Flint said in 1940, "Perhaps the most striking thing about camping is its ability to survive. An interest in camping grows. It becomes a hobby, through which you build vitality, make new friends, learn cooperative living, and have the best of times to think over in your duller moments, music of waves and moonlight on the trees." Evolved, spontaneously and quietly, this hobby grows with each experience. It has a powerful significance in our lives. It directs our interests and molds our character. We who are brimming over with energy and living in the joys of camp experiences have the unique responsibility of passing this joy on to others. It is for us to make this camping adventure possible for other young people. How? Talk about the fun you had at Camp 4-H. Tell your friends about camp. Take them out to visit camp. Have them find a way to go camping. Then indeed will our tree grow tall with firm roots and beautiful foliage, adopting new and more virile forms to the strong root stock.